Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik, Voss, and this is a breakdown of The Penguin, Episode 1, an HBO series set in the universe of Matt Reeves' The Batman, the 2022 film starring Robert Pattinson, Barry Keoghan as the Joker, and Paul Dano as the Riddler, who, yes, was the source of perhaps the most infamous New Rockstars thumbnail. Let's break down all the details you missed in this episode and how it connects to its own DC world. So we open on wet footprints on the floor, leading up to Oz Cobb, aka Oswald Cobblepot, Colin Farrell, looking out the window. This is where we left Oz at the end of The Batman, as he looked out at the flooded streets of Gotham, drenched by the Riddler's bombings that destroyed the seawalls. These footprints are staggered in a way, left by Oz's limp, making the series, I guess, a March of the Penguin, but also a prototypical evolutionary creature who first transitioned from sea to land. You'll also notice that these opening images often frame Oz's head within circles. The framing of the bridge outside the home, the circles of the elevator lights in the iceberg lounge, and then the circular windows of that same suite. Despite his reputation as a hustling gangster, he's really just an introspective man who's caught in his own head. We hear the notes of Michael Giacchino's score as newscasts remind us of the murder of Mayor Don Mitchell Jr. He was killed by the Riddler in the opening scene of the 2022 film. Newscasters talking about the drug trade surrounding drops. Those are the eye drop substances that we saw in the film that actually inspired that green teardrop shaped Halloween mask. We hear mentioned of Salvatore Moroni, whose arrest Mayor Mitchell celebrated with framed news headlines in the film and led to the rise of the rival Falcone family. And they mentioned the arrest of Carmine Falcone himself, played by John Turturro. He was ID'd as the elusive El Rata Alada of that film, the winged rat, thanks to Oz actually knowing Spanish. Carmine was the police informant.
Goddamn rat.
Oh, so you're a big man now, Oz, huh?
Maybe I am.
Really, Oz? Because to me, you're always just a gimp in an empty suit.
This led to Carmine being shot in the crowd by Riddler at Ashton's sniper rifle just across the street. He was actually sneakily foreshadowed very early in that film in the window in the upper corner of frame. I think it was like my favorite Easter egg in that film. These broadcasts show alternate angles of the seawall detonations and the flooding of the city, including the flooding of Gotham Square Garden, where Batman led Mayor-elect Bella Real and other attendees to safety, and then muddily attended to them on the roof of the arena, giving us one of the final shots of the film. But in this wide shot, I don't think we see Pattinson anywhere in there. They have said that Batman will not be in this show. Jamie Lawson returns here as a cameo as Bella Real, promising to rebuild the city in what looks like a very green screen background set. The fictional news outlets GC1 and WGOT return from the Batman film, and along the weather ticker are various parts of Gotham City from when the city was explored block by block in the No Man's Land comic storyline. We see Blackgate Isle, that's the island known as the home of Blackgate Prison, Bowery, that's known as Gotham's commercial district, Bristol Township, that's the affluent suburb in New Jersey known as the home of Wayne Manor. We actually see some of the mansions during this newsreel, and we go there later to the Falcone estate. Burnley is another district of Gotham City north of the Sprang River. Chelsea and Chinatown are really parts of Manhattan. Coventry is a middle-class district in Gotham south of the Sprang River. Crest Hill is a neighborhood in Bristol Township. Gotham Heights is a neighborhood in Gotham's East End where Thomas and Martha Wayne were murdered. Grant Park is a neighborhood in South Gotham. Old Gotham is a large architectural scheme for Gotham City designed by Cyrus Pinckney and promoted by Judge Solomon Wayne from 1992's Batman Legends of the Dark Knight number 27. Otisburg is a residential district of Gotham that was also referenced as a gag in the 1978 Superman film in Lex Luthor's New West Coast that he was dreaming of building. Port Adams is the city's dockyards. Limtown is another obscure Gotham neighborhood. Robbinsville is another Gotham neighborhood named after comics writer Frank Robbins. So Oz drives his custom painted purple Maserati back to his iceberg lounge. That was a location visited by Batman/Bruce 3 times in the 2022 film, each time with different appearances showing the evolution of his character. Oz waddles under his umbrella, a prop and weapon and tool commonly associated with the Penguin character. Oz returns to Carmine's penthouse suite and breaks into Carmine's vault with the sledgehammer, retrieving files labeled HH, Erik Calatayud, and Councilman Sebastian Haiti, with receipts and a photo of Councilman Haiti gambling. So Sebastian Haiti in the comics was a corrupt mayor of Gotham. Erik Calatayud is an AD who has worked on films but isn't credited on this show, so maybe he's someone's friend. HH comes with this interesting Victorian era photo, Founders Club, dated 1893. HH could refer to Hamilton Hill, who's another known corrupt Gotham mayor from the comics, but HH is also known as Batman's nonverbal tick that was introduced in Grant Morrison's Justice League America run. So it's like Batman going like, There's also a file for Austin Whittick, who is this show's costume designer. And we see photos of John Vitti, Michael Kelly's character, the underboss of the Falcones, with a mistress. Carmine's son Alberto Falcone, played by Michael Zegan from the Marvelous Miss Maisel and Boardwalk Empire, catches him. Oz claims to be getting the jewels for him and calls Carmine a great man. But you know, Alberto must have heard Oz calling him a goddamn rat before. Now, in the comics, Alberto Falcone becomes the holiday killer in The Long Halloween and Dark Victory, but not on the show. Alberto's ring came from his father Carmine, who said that he got got it from Sal Maroni, making this ring kind of a symbol of power in the Gotham underworld. Now, Colin Farrell is back in the heavy makeup and prosthetics that he wore for the Batman, and he said for this show, when they wrapped the season, he said, quote, "I never want to put that suit and that head on again," which is really Colin Farrell saying this.
It's too much shit on me, I can't breathe.
Oz recalls a past mob boss named Rex Calabrese, who in the comics was a past boss in Gotham who was pushed out by the Falcones before Batman's time. Oz says how Rex knew everyone's name, was revered, he died of a heart attack with the cigar still in his hand, and he even had a parade thrown in his armor. While Alberto mocks that old school thinking, it really reflects the way Oz thinks gangsters should operate, a kind of paternalistic service for immigrant communities who couldn't trust the police to protect them. Oz is still living in that old world, so he shoots Alberto not just out of ego, but because he sees Gotham's flooding as a way to kind of wash clean both the Falcones and the Maronis. Now, after shooting Alberto, Oz's reaction is just great. He's like relieved for a moment, but then he realizes, oh crap, I'm gonna have to move this body with my limp. We see him in the exotic dancer costume rack to find a suit hang-up bag that he stuffs Alberto into, and then he puts a garbage bag on himself, I guess to keep blood from oozing onto his suit. Oz finds some kids trying to strip his car, and he stops one of them, Victor Aguilar.
Please.
I wonder if it's Victor's speech impediment that softens Oz to him as someone who has to walk with a limp. That may also be why he makes Victor drive, because as we'll see later, Oz's right foot, which he would be using to press the gas pedal and the brake pedal, is mangled. Oz goes through Alberto's phone, which is a Samsung, not an iPhone, and there's always people pointing out the belief that Apple doesn't let their phones be used in movies and TV shows for immoral characters, but that actually was only true for Rian Johnson's Knives Out in 2017, and ever since then, we've seen plenty of exceptions to that supposed rule. Still, I guess it does apply here. On Alberto's phone calendar is a shipment on November 18, and then this is pretty crazy. On November 23rd, it says Gotham Knights. Now, Gotham Knights is a 2022 game following Nightwing, Robin, Red Hood, and Batgirl, who try to restore justice to Gotham after Batman's death and a battle between the Court of Owls and the League of Shadows. I don't know if we're gonna get some update about the game series coming this year on November 23rd, or maybe the Gotham Knights on this show is just like a sports game that Alberto planned to go to. The football team in Gotham is supposed to be the Gotham Rogues. Maybe the Gotham Knights is like a hockey team or something. Also interesting that on the 31st of October was just written Bella, which makes me wonder that Alberto might have had a rendezvous with Bella Real on Halloween night, which was the night that Don Mitchell was murdered. Victor's driver's license correctly lists Gotham as being in New Jersey, though oddly it's a Gotham driver's license, despite all driver's licenses in the United States coming from the state, not from the city you live in. Oz recalls an East Side corner store called Buddy's, where he would mix slush puppy flavors to make a suicide, saying that he did so with all of his brothers. And I think this might be the first mention of the Penguin having siblings. He's most commonly known as like an only child from a very rich family. Oz goes to his acquaintance, Eve, to get an alibi.
Anytime after 10, but not before.
I love this detail, because for Eve to only be able to lie to potential detectives about being with Oz after 10 means that before 10, she must have been with someone from law enforcement who would have known an alibi before 10 was bullshit. Oz waits for him and Victor to move Alberto's body until daylight, because he knows the Batman would only be on patrol at nighttime. After agreeing to let Victor live as his driver and his protege, Oz heads to the jewelry district up to Burgess Jewelry, which is a reference to Burgess Meredith, who played the Penguin on the 60s ABC Batman series starring Adam West. So really he lives in the upper floor of Burgess Jewelry, and it's just kind of a fun detail there. He turned into a home a jewelry with vaults for doors, which I guess is a smart way to stay secure, but think about that, having to lock yourself in a vault every night. And he takes off his shoe and sock to show his mangled foot.
Holy God, what are you showing me? Come on!
In some comics, Oswald Cobblepot was mocked as a child for his long nose and his grotesque appearance, and in some cases he just waddled due to a hip ailment. Here they ground it into some other kind of physical defect. So they drive through the flooded part of the city where signs hang from buildings, "Don't forget about us, help us." And the way the freeway stays above the floodwater, while on the other side out of this neighborhood is collapsed, meaning that everyone living there is trapped from driving out of there. The imagery just kind of evokes New Orleans after the flooding from Hurricane Katrina. Oz goes into his warehouse where his workers are repackaging drops that they recovered from floodwaters, and he hands over the Councilman Haiti photos to set up a politician to have in his pocket. This version of Oz job is clearly modeled on Tony Soprano, who's a beefy mobster who struggles to walk sometimes, but he's always hustling. He lives in New Jersey, not New York, and he tries to keep his head down while others in the criminal hierarchy get all the attention as the public heads of the family so that the cops don't come after him. Like he tries to make himself small in that way. They drive out to the Falcone estate in Bristol Township, and we see a sign for Burnside, which is another neighborhood in the comics across the Gotham River. The Falcone mansion is designed to look like an Italian villa. As Italian Americans, they would want to create the mansion in the style of the old world. It's fun to think that just a few estates over would be Wayne Manor. The Italian motif continues on the inside of the building, where on the wall is a piece of Simone Martini's fresco Guidericio da Fogliano, which is painted all the way back in freaking 1330, possibly remade in the 15th century. Now in the real world, this is on a wall in a palazzo in Florence, but the Falcones are so loaded and powerful that they have like a 700-year-old piece of art just hanging in their dining room. So Johnny Vitti sits at the head of the table, uninterested, while doing the talking is Milos, the bodyguard Grappa, an enforcer in the Falcone crime family from the Long Halloween storyline. He says that their plan is to move all drug trade operations to Robbinsville. Now, this actor, James Matteo, played Frank Perconte on HBO's Band of Brothers. And before that, he was the lost boy Don't Ask in Steven Spielberg's Hook. Now, on the wall behind Oz is a portrait that I assume is Carmine Falcone with his two kids, Alberto and Sophia. And we know that on this show, Mark Strong will be playing Carmine Falcone, replacing John Turturro, who I assume they just couldn't get back for this show. And I actually kind of like it that you could just recast actors in the same kind of costume and we're all okay with them playing this character. Keep that in mind next time you try to digitally reanimate a dead actor. Just recast a new actor who kind of looks like them. But seeing this portrait, being reminded that there is another heir to this family just makes it kind of creepy when she suddenly enters in the background like a serial killer, which she literally is.
In fact, it's got the potential to revolutionize the drug business.
What kind of shipment?
I can't reveal the details yet.
Oz notices from their silence, and it takes him a moment to realize that they are paralyzed in fear upon seeing who's behind him, Sophia Falcone, played by the incredible Kristen Milioti.
I thought you was still at,
Arkham?
Yeah.
No, I've been rehabilitated.
It's kind of fun to see a series try to be DC's Sopranos, because here in the same scene, we see two actors from that series. Michael Kelly played FBI agent Ron Goddard, and Kristen Milioti played Johnny Sack's daughter, Catherine Sacramone. The character of Sophia Falcone was introduced in The Long Halloween. She was released by Carmine from prison early to help them find the holiday killer, and once it's revealed to be her brother, Alberto, Sophia actually ends up falling out of the penthouse after an attack by Catwoman. Then, in the Dark Victory storyline, Sophia is initially in a wheelchair with a neck brace as the new head of the family, while a new serial killer called the Hangman kills Gotham cops with a noose, and it's revealed that Sophia is that killer and she's been faking her paralysis. Now this Sophia later tells us that the papers did call her the Hangman, so I'm assuming this live action version of the character might have had a similar backstory. Kristen Milioti brings a whole new dimension to the character as she exhibits a more understated but far more menacing form of criminal psychopathy that we almost never get to see from the rogues gallery of villains on screen. Rather than showing outright rage, she lets off these like faint little smiles whenever something is nagging at her. And she wears a tightly tied scarf around her neck in the scene, which seems like a nod to her hangman reputation. And I was thinking might be covering some kind of cuts or burns on her neck. And later in this episode, she's wearing like a turtleneck that shows more of her neck, but I think there still might be more under that neck. And her even quietly asking Oz about her brother Alberto gets Milos and Johnny to beg her to stop because they know where her mere curiosity will lead. She follows Oz outside to get her answer, which you have to imagine came after she had intimidated Johnny and Milos upstairs. Outside, she laser focuses on that bullet hole in Oz's Maserati, which probably gives her a hunch that Oz has been a little too busy in the past 24 hours if he was willing to drive a car with a bullet hole around without getting it fixed. I read a lot of comics, obviously for work and research, but also the reason this is my job is because I love comic books. I'm always on the lookout for new apps, and once I found Global Comics, it immediately became one of my new faves. Global Comics is a digital entertainment platform that empowers creators with the tools they need to reach new audiences and monetize their work so they can keep making the stories that mean so much to the rest of us. Global Comics is dedicated to reshaping the landscape of graphic fiction creation and distribution, and the fact that it's so creator forward really appeals to me. Global Comics just launched their highly anticipated Vertical Scroll Comics program, which I love because it's such an easy way to read comics on my phone. The opening lineup is real solid too, with content from major publishers like Dark Horse, Top Cow, Bad Egg, AWA, Humanoids, and TKO. My favorite favorite so far has been Stranger Things. It's just a great way to get to experience a story from a new perspective. If you want more comics in your pocket, Global Comics is the app for you. Right now, our audience can get a 33% discount on a year of Global Comics Gold by using the code GCX New Rockstars at checkout, or just click the link in the description below to download the app. At this meal, Sophia gobbles the food with her hands, as she probably got accustomed to eating like an Arkham patient. She's not afraid to get her hands dirty. It's a kind of show of force to Oz. So is her calling out the stares that they are getting and her reputation as the hangman. It's all a predicate to revisit the whole Alberto conversation with Oz, because she reminds Oz that she had walked in right as he said the words, "revolutionize the drug business." Now, Oz, at least in this moment, smartly plays this by trying to say that this was something Alberto cut both of them in on, but kept them both siloed from each other. And even though the end of this episode proves that Sophia probably did not fully believe him here, she has to admit to herself that there is a chance that that might be true. And just to kind of indicate that she sees right through him, she whispers in his ear that she always knew he was capable of more, and then just kind of leaves him with this look. So this music is actually coming from Michael Giacchino's son, Mick Giacchino, and there's definitely a John Williams Jaws melody to Sophia's music sting. Dun-dun. Oz and Victor take the elevated train to connect with an underground subway platform, where on the other tracks, a train has crashed and pumps are draining floodwater. I just love how much of like the recovering city of Gotham we see on this show. Like on this train are several city workers with their orange vests. Just the general setting of this makes it feel like it's a completely different city, but a city that looks like cities that we've seen before, but just not, you know, a studio backlot. Also, this detail of Oz refusing to take the disability seats that are open when Victor totally notices this, and it suggests that Oz probably takes this route often and he just doesn't want people to look at his limp that way. Now, there's this guy on the train with a QR code with Gotham's true face beneath it. Now, when you scan this, it takes you to what was originally gothamstrueface.com. I thought it was gonna be like a Gotham's Two-Face thing, but no, it actually changes to the URL rataalada.com, which you'll remember is the URL that Warner used to promote the 2022 The Batman film. Remember when they were dropping all the different ciphers from the Riddler, including his full Zodiac alphabet? But in this case, it takes you to what looks like a chat room. And I'm gonna read the transcript for you. Clockbreaker says, "What's been put into motion can't be stopped." Then, rein it in, "Arkham's releasing patients and Blackgate is a mess. No one's really a prisoner in there, not even our old pal Sal Maroni." Then, "Hold the line," 81 says, "People say they want the truth, but they shield their eyes when we shine the light." And then Determinator says, "Let's make sure they're not blinded again to the corruption, the killings, the Falcone power grab." And that's linked. And then, "Hold the line," 81 says, "We start in the streets tonight at 9 p.m. Meet at the Metro outside Crown Point." And then Clockbreaker says, "Done and done. The revolution is just getting started." Sorry, this is just how I read anybody who tries to talk this way in a chat room on the internet. Also, what's a chat room? I just dated myself. Now, when you click on the Falcone Power Grab, it takes you to an article in the Gotham Gazette dated Thursday, September 19th, 2024, even though this show is set in 2022. It's an article for the future! Call Doc Brown. And then the article is headlined, "Crime Pays Well. Heir to the Falcone crime family parties above the wreckage." And the article goes on to criticize Alberto Falcone's party boy behavior, stumbling out of clubs in Chinatown at 3 a.m., which, you know, may come back in a future episode, we'll see, and talking about how he's been seen at the Iceberg Lounge and the club within it, 44 Below. And it also says, quote, "Wealthy playboys are nothing new to Gotham," which is obviously a bit of a dig at Bruce Wayne. But these names, Determinator, Hold the Line 81, these are all screen names that were actually seen in the Batman film. These chatters were all part of the Riddler Edward Nashton's dark web chat room that shows up during the movie. And actually, last July, Warner used the same exact site and many of these names to direct fans to the location of Hall H at San Diego Comic-Con. And I can tell you, I went to that panel and I really just went there to get a seat for the Marvel panel that was coming up right afterwards. But hey, I learned a lot from the people working on this show. Now, Crown Point is mentioned in this chat, and it's interesting because this area was the hardest hit part of Gotham from the flooding.
Poorest neighborhoods that have been hit the hardest, especially in Crown Point.
And it's actually where the FEMA camp is this episode. And it sounds like there may be a faction of the Riddler's followers who still want to continue this mission to kill and bring down the power brokers of the city. Will this spill over in a future episode? We'll see. Maybe even this frustration with Arkham releasing Sophia Falcone and other prisoners and Blackgate not taking criminal punishment seriously, people like Sal Maroni, could indicate maybe an affiliation with groups like the League of Shadows Shadows, maybe even the Court of Owls. Let's keep an eye on this site as it updates each week. So Oz and Victor get off at Irving Grove Station, a residential suburb of a working class community. Oz has a car already parked there with the key on the tire, and inside there's a preloaded CD that plays Dolly Parton's 925 right at the spot of the chorus, which tells us that Oz had already hit play on this song when he's leaving his mom's house to drive to the station because, yeah, this is the best song to vibe to as you're starting off your workday. The song literally begins with dun 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 dun, and she goes, tumble out of bed and I stumble to the kitchen, pour myself a cup of ambition, and yawn and stretch to try to come to life. If you don't know the song, I just recommend try starting your day to it. I think you will have a better day. And yes, I love how this episode's end credits bring this music back because they want this to feel like kind of a workplace procedural for Oz. This is just how he's going to start and end every day. We meet Oz's mother, Frances, played by Deidre O'Connell. And this is another aspect of the series that seems to be pulling from The Sopranos. The pilot and actually the first few seasons often focused on Tony Soprano visiting his mother and exploring his very complicated relationship with her. And often, as we found out from Lorraine Bracco's therapist character, it was so complex that he would map his issues with his mother on other women in his life that he would have sexual feelings for. And I think there may be some of that in this episode. Victor sees the family photos of Oz with his brothers that Oz had a copy of in his home, and then several other photos of the family on the wall. And moments like this are why I think Matt Reeves renamed the character from Oswald Cobblepot to Oz Cobb, or Oswald Cobb, because his mom calls him Oswald, despite the grumblings that has caused in some viewers who probably were never going to watch the show anyway. I mean, how many of you actually have Max subscriptions? I think he really changed it because Cobblepot has an English aristocracy vibe to it. Like, they named the character that because he was supposed to have been someone who came up from wealth. Pretty much all past incarnations we've seen of the Penguin are like an aristocrat, but this Penguin comes from a working class upbringing. And in these kinds of neighborhoods, you would not meet someone named Cobblepot. Like, these families' grandparents and great-grandparents would have come through Ellis Island, and the immigration agents probably would have shortened their names, or in other cases, they probably would have just shortened their names themselves to assimilate into the community. Now, for a couple of these photos on the wall here, it seems like they might have generated a young version of Colin Farrell. I thought they might be using photos of Colin Farrell from his youth. They don't totally look like young Colin Farrell. They might have found a kid who looks eerily like a young Colin Farrell if we didn't know what he looked like when he was a kid, and just kind of looks like the Colin Farrell that we knew in Bruges and just kind of like rewound from there. But I actually think they de-aged the adult actor's face to get this slightly larger face on this photo. It just seems brighter and more alert than the other brothers. Oz gives Frances a necklace from Carmine's safe and then realizes Frances's pill container is empty and the tub is full.
The boys were playing in the bath. They didn't want to get out. What?
Nothing.
So while Frances's mind is slipping, Oz knows that he is unable to lie to his mother's face, and that's one thing she's always going to see through, so he really just has to confess shooting Alberto Falcone, and that he did it because Alberto laughed at him. And Frances gives him some problematic mothering, like Tony Soprano's mother often would do, saying that he sounds like a weak boy, and he should just own it, and say that he actually shot Alberto out of instinct. So after this, they watch on the TV the 1946 film Gilda, starring the great Rita Hayworth, the moment when she's singing the number, "Put the Blame on the Mame." Victor asks who Mame is, and Oz says that it doesn't matter, she's just a scapegoat. So Rita Hayworth's Gilda is really the ultimate femme fatale in classic Hollywood, and the song's lyrics blame a woman named Mame as the true cause of the Great Chicago Fire in 1871, the Great Blizzard of 1888 in New York City, and the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, and even in the song, the fictional shooting of Dan McGrew during the Yukon Gold Rush, which comes from a 1907 narrative poem by Robert W. Service. Now, Rita Hayworth actually went on to kind of resent this film for how it solidified her reputation as kind of like a pinup girl and as like a sex symbol. Specifically, the Bikini Atoll atomic tests, you know, the ones they gave us SpongeBob, were actually conducted using a poster of her. And when she heard about that, she was justifiably pissed. And perhaps Rita Hayworth's Gilda's most significant cinematic contribution was through Stephen King's novella, Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption, that used a poster of her from this film to cover the hole in the wall of Andy Dufresne's cell. And yes, they were watching a different scene from Gilda in the scene in Frank Darabont's film adaptation. So Oz kind of looks at Rita Hayworth's Gilda with a kind of like interesting look on his face. And I think in this moment, he might be like merging other women in his life into one. Like, he looks down on his mother in a kind of pity as she kind of forces him to silence his more vulnerable parts, and he struggles to lie to her in the same kind of way that Sophia Falcone can see through him. It seems like he is doing some transference of his feelings toward his mother onto Sophia Falcone, and that's why she's able to get under his skin. But also in this moment, Oz is having a similar eureka moment that Batman has in many of the Batman stories, particularly the ending of The Dark Knight, that what society craves most of all is really really a scapegoat to eat all of their sins so that they don't have to look too deeply at their own faults. Batman is a hero because he's willing to take on that burden himself. Oz gets the idea of empowering someone else to be the scapegoat, basically creating the scapegoat. In this case, the Maronis, to be the scapegoat of Alberto's murder. He says it doesn't matter what the name of the scapegoat is, just that there is one. And speaking of Shawshank Redemption, Oz visits Sal Maroni in Blackgate Prison, and Sal is played by longtime character actor Clancy Brown, who played the corrupt Captain Byron Hadley in the Shawshank Redemption film. In the events before 2022's The Batman, Carmine Falcone betrayed Sal Maroni by ratting out his operation to Don Mitchell Jr., leading to the raid on the Maronis, which Mitchell used to get elected to mayor. In the comics, Sal Maroni is the gangster responsible for splashing acid on Harvey Dent's face. Oz now offers Maroni a chance at revenge to give him the details on the Falcones' move out of the city so that the Maronis can swoop in and take over the Falcones' drug operation. And meanwhile, Oz says he'll play the victim while taking a cut of the profits. Sal justifiably does not trust him, but Oz does what he really came here to do: return the ring, which at first seems like a token of loyalty until later when we realize this is totally just to frame the Maronis so he can get out of this dilemma he's in. Oz drives back to his flat in Gotham in the Jewelry District past a digital sign for Orchid's Diamonds, which I'm wondering might be a nod to the female vigilante Black Orchid in the DC Comics. But across the street from where his place is the Peregrinators Club, which is an exclusive lounge for the wealthiest of Gotham, which was originally from a 1992 episode of Batman the Animated Series, Joker's Favor, and has come back in several other comics. His plum Maserati catches the eye of Sophia, so Oz has to flee. He drives to a FEMA camp where the Falcones think, oh, look, a sea of umbrellas. Of course, Oswald Cobb is going to try to blend in with a bunch of umbrellas, but instead he cleverly hides in the trunk that probably still stinks of Alberto's corpse. One Falcone guy catches him, and Oz struggles with the guy. They smack the radio, and it plays When in Rome's The Promise from 1987. You know, the part where it's like, I'm sorry, but I'm thinking of the right words to say. I know they don't sound the way I planned them to be. You'll remember this as the track that played over the end credits of Napoleon Dynamite and has like featured in a lot of different shows in recent years. Like When in Rome is like, cha-ching, we're getting those royalties, baby. But I love that Oz listens to Dolly Parton when he's in the burbs, but when he's in the city, he listens to like 80s synth pop. He takes out the guy's eye and then catches a lucky break when that guy gets Regina Georged by a Gotham City school bus. Sophia strips Oz down and ties him up in the Falcone estate greenhouse. She says the guards of Arkham would strip her down like this. Now, since this would have had to be a full body fat suit for Colin Farrell, I get what he means by never wanting to wear this suit again. Like, he couldn't just like have padding under his clothes. It had to be like a realistic, like hair covered Harvey Weinstein suit. And I'm not just saying Harvey Weinstein. They said that was like a visual comparison point that they used to design his face. Sophia tracked down one of Victor's buddies whom Oz had shot at in the street outside the club that night. This was actually the one who was closest to the trunk when Oz put a bullet hole in it. And when Oz denies this, she shoots this poor kid in the head. She says,
that's what you wanted, right? Have my reputation precede me?
They wrap razor wire around Oz's shoulder in his armpit to try to get him to talk.
Tell me that I'm too emotional and that I have an overactive imagination and that I shouldn't take things so personally.
Whew, I'm not sure we've seen this kind of raw intensity from a DC villain since Heath Ledger's Joker threatened Gamble with a razor pressed against his soft tissue, telling him one of his many why so serious origin stories. Sophia is communicating to Oz that she can't be minimized via gaslighting or lies or deception. Oz is just gonna have to get ahead in this conflict by playing Gotham's two crime families against each other. Victor sends the car they stashed Alberto in, charging into the Falcone estate with Payback scratched on the trunk and Alberto's pinky missing. From her scream alone, Oz knows that this plan worked. Mick Giacchino's music sting returns, but now as a victory point for Oz. Oz gives off the same chuckle as when he first shot Alberto, but this time he doesn't really cringe afterward. He can just feel relieved. So we end over suicide-flavored slush puppies from the Buddy's Corner Store as Oz and Victor reveal that the plan with the pinky was to connect Sal Maroni now having his ring back in Blackgate, so the Maronis would have no choice but to take credit for killing Alberto, and that, plus Eve as his alibi, would be enough for now to clear him from this. Yes, of course, this is not the best long-term strategy. I'm sure Sophia is going to learn the truth before too long, and I'm really worried about Eve, but it gives Oz another 9-to-5 workday to make his next move. Oz asks why Victor altered the plan from just Alberto's head with the pinky alone, and Victor says that, well, you know, when he's about to cut the head off, he started to think about the trachea and then the spine on the other side. And this is just a great example showing how Victor was thinking about the anatomical structure on the inside of the neck, because he didn't reduce him to just being an objectified thing, as Sophia accused Oz of doing, but rather he looked at him the way a surgeon would look at a patient or at least a medical cadaver and have have at least some empathy for the thing he would be cutting up. Oz says, though, that there's room to grow, and he plans to take whatever's in Alberto's incoming shipment on November 18th. So I ask you, viewer, what do you think that game-changing, drop-replacing shipment is? Is it a new type of drug? Some other kind of valuable thing that would upend the criminal underworld, like weapons or human trafficking? I only say that because, you know, we had a similar thing, and the pilot of Netflix's Daredevil ended up being like a kid in the crate, you know? And with Matt Reeves saying the Batman 2 will follow this flooded Gotham City into its approaching winter, is the Rita Hayworth put the blame on the main lyrics about New York City's Great Blizzard of 1888 foretelling an icy Gotham where Mr. Freeze could appear? Actually, could Victor Aguilar of this series become our next Victor Freeze? Probably not, but I really want Mr. Freeze to be the villain of the second movie. Comment down below with your thoughts. Follow me at EA Voss. Subscribe to all 3 channels in the New Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.